You're listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. I am your host, Al Mega, CEO of Comic Crusaders and Undercover Capes. In this show, I'm sitting down with creators from all walks of life to talk about inspiration, process, the lessons they've learned, and a whole lot more. Epa, what up, mi gente? It's your boy Al Mega. Welcome to a brand new Comic Crusaders podcast. And today we have an amazing guest lined up for you. I mean, homie over here does it all. Seriously, he does it all. He's a comedian. He's a performer. He's a writer. He got some dope shorts out right now on this dope website called GoneNative.tv that you need to see. Put a smile on your face. And it got some messaging too, all right? Let me introduce the one, the only, the amazing Mr. Joey Clift.
Wow, what an intro! Wow, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. And the last time we had tried this, the internet gods did not allow Mega and Clift to chat. So today, that's it. All right.
Oh yeah.
I gave Spectrum a what for, and now we're ready.
Oh yeah, it's good. Yeah, I think that last time it was funny because you set me up with this just amazing, high energy, great intro, and then I feel like right when you introduced me is when we kind of had like internet stuff. So I was sitting there, it was just like, come on, ready? I'm on. Wait. Okay, I'll just sit here quietly.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Wait,
it's good.
right?
It's good. Yeah.
But awesome. I'm glad that we have time though to chit chat about this dope, animated series you have that's on the website GoneNative.tv. With some messaging, funny as heck, because you definitely have a short, I think that was even prior to that, about the bear. One of the longest titles I've ever seen in my life. So, but we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, so reel it back just a bit. So let the folks know, Joey, where you originally hailed from, and what was your first thing you ever fell in love with in pop culture?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Okay, so I'm an enrolled member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe based out of southern Washington State, like kind of Mount St. Helens is our Aboriginal territory. And then I grew up on the Tulalip Reservation, which is about 45 minutes north of Seattle. And I currently live in Los Angeles. I'm a comedian, TV writer. And then, first thing I ever fell out in love with pop culture. Okay, so I'm going to say probably, so two answers. One would be like, did you ever watch the sketch comedy show The State on MTV?
The State? No, not familiar.
So it was this like super funny sketch comedy show that like a lot of people who like became really famous, like writers and comedians, originally started on that show, like Tom Lennon and Ben Garant, who they wrote like the Night at the Museum movies, and they've written a lot of other movies and stuff like that. And so The State for me was just a show that came out, in the early 90s when I was like, still in elementary school. And I remember watching that show when I was a kid and thinking to myself, like, I think that it's like a really weird show. And like, oh, I think that this is funny, but I also think that I maybe think this is funnier than other people. Like, it's just like, oh, this speaks to my like sense of humor more than I think it speaks to other people's sense of humor. And then, of course, like The Simpsons, Conan O'Brien kind of like fit in similar areas of just like weird alt comedy that like has really become kind of my bread and butter now that I've, entered in comedy.
So, growing up, loving this alt weird comedy and all, did you have a tribe around you that enjoyed this as well, or were you kind of a lone wolf in your geekdom?
So I would say that like, I think that growing up, I was, I had friends that like The Simpsons and stuff like that, because it was, the biggest show in the 90s, of course. Yeah. But I feel like for a lot of this stuff, I was like a little bit alone in my geekdom. Like I was the type of person that I think, like in, elementary school, middle school, junior high, I would always like crack jokes in the back of the class. And I feel like I was just a bit too like, I feel like a lot of my friends and like people around me would be like, why did you say that weird thing? And they would like not track that it's a joke. And then I feel like once I got into high school, like people started to catch up and they were like, oh, this guy's funny. That's what his thing is. And then like, that's around when I think that I started to meet a lot of people that were like, like had the same weird sense of humor that I did.
Oh, excellent. Oh, you would have been popular in a New York school for sure.
Oh,
I was one of those backseat kids, with
totally.
of the joke or doing something stupid. I was a good kid. Don't get me wrong. I was a good kid. I didn't get in trouble, but the teachers didn't quite appreciate my disturbance.
Yeah. I feel like I had a lot of conversations with my teachers in high school where they would pull me aside and they would nicely say, like, I know that you're a nice kid. Just if you could be like a little less distracting, I would really appreciate it.
Right?
It's not
Not the asshole
the
down, right?
yeah, it's like they're not yelling at me. They're just like, please, just like say less jokes. Like they're
Yeah,
funny and they're good and we like them, yeah.
too funny, too funny. All right, so talk about then you getting serious now about writing and performing, because here you are being, kind of the class clown, right? Dropping those jokes, being the funny guy. When did you think, okay, maybe I can make something of this?
So my story is like I think kind of a weird one in that growing up, I didn't really see any Native American comedians on TV who were like big names doing cool stuff in the 90s and early 2000s. Like I know there was a guy named Charlie Hill who's a super funny like Oneida comedian, but his peak was really like the 70s and the 80s, which was just before my time.
Yeah.
And since then, I've started to realize, oh, like there were funny Native comedians, just not on The Simpsons or Conan O'Brien or whatever. And so growing up, I like because I didn't see any funny Native comedians on TV, I didn't think I was like allowed to work in comedy. So
Ah,
so instead, I went to school for what to me felt like the next best thing, which was to be like just a small market TV weather guy, like those
a
guys.
weather guy.
Those guys with the news, they like crack jokes, they have fun personalities, and
Yeah,
that
they
made
do.
yeah, totally, and that made sense as like an attainable way that I can get paid making people laugh. Trying to be like the next Al Roker or whatever.
Yeah.
And fortunately, like, so I went to college for that, like a place called Washington State University that has like the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication, which is like a really
Cool.
fancy communications college. And while I was going there, I did a lot of college TV, a lot of stand up, and a lot of college radio, with the attitude that like, oh, this is going to help me for my eventual career, like reporting the weather in like Post Falls, Idaho, or whatever. And fortunately, a bunch of my professors kind of pulled me aside, seeing clearly what I was angling for, and gave me the really obvious advice of like, hey, you could just work in comedy, right? And I was like, what?
It's
Uh,
possible.
yeah, it's like, oh, it's a thing I could do, because it's clear, like everything that I did was like geared toward that. And so this was about 13 years ago or so. So I moved to LA in 2010, and then really just kind of dove into the LA
All right.
comedy scene with both feet. Once I like
So,
once people encouraged me and told me that it was a possibility.
so what is this LA thing? Everyone I speak to, they have this point in their life. It's LA. So, when you did that dive, did you have someone there, or did you take the crazy dip and said, "I'm gonna go and f it all, whatever happens, happens"?
So, I mean, I would say that like a little bit of both. It's like I had a couple friends who like, graduated a year or two before me from college that like, were down to get coffee with me and give me advice. I think the key thing is that my brother actually lived in Inglewood, which
Okay.
like my brother doesn't work in the industry. He's, like a car mechanic. He manages a lot of like, car repair kind of places like that industry. And he just like had a couch that he was okay with me sleeping on. So like, and like, I still had to pay him rent. I had to pay him like $300 a month in rent, which was for LA was him cutting me a deal. But that was at least like a place that I could land, and I slept on his couch for probably about three
All right,
years
wait a
while I
minute.
was
If
yeah.
you're paying $300 a month rent, no other ass better be on that couch, because you're paying $300 a month for that couch.
Nah, I mean, look, no,
All
I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you. I mean,
right.
look, it's like it was in the living room, so it's like I couldn't be like that's my
Right.
rent is paying
I,
for
I
this
put my
small
head
couch.
there. Don't you put your ass where I put my head.
Yeah. No, like, look, before I go to bed every day, I'd wipe it down for sure. But yeah, so I lived with my brother for about 3 years, and then just kind
Yeah,
of hit a point in my career where I could afford to move out. And
nice.
yeah, so but yeah, I think that like having a brother's couch I could crash on in Inglewood was definitely key in like the early days.
Wonderful. The guy in the couch syndrome. There we
Yeah,
go.
oh, 100%.
Yeah, but it's all right. So you said, okay, 3 years. I mean, so it was 3 years you on the couch and hustling. What
Yeah,
was that journey like, bro? I mean,
so
but once you landed and you
yeah.
started going for your first opportunity, all right, what was that like for you? Did you get shot down or hired?
So the reason so I moved to LA in it was March of 2010, and the reason that I moved is that I had like a job interview to be what's called a
Oh,
production
okay.
assistant, which is like somebody who like gets coffee for people and just sort of like an assistant for the
A nice
production.
word for a gopher, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, go for a runner. It's all the same thing. So I had like a job interview for that on like sort of a reality travel show, and so like my interview was like the middle of March. So I was like, okay, so that's when I need to move to LA is for that interview at least, because I couldn't do it over the phone. I had to be in the office for it. And so I did this job interview. I think I researched every single person in the office, looked at all of their credits, so I'd have stuff to talk about with all of them. Probably put more work into researching for this interview than I probably ever done, and I did not get the job.
Oh
So
man,
I was like,
really?
so at that point I was like, okay, I've got like, I've got maybe 2 months worth of like college student loans in my bank account that I could spend on, staying on my brother's couch and like, paying for food and stuff like that. And fortunately, like while I was getting coffee with a lot of my like, friends and like alumni from my college, a friend of mine, like a really, really good, a producer at the time, was a production coordinator. She, took my resume, and then the next day she got a call from one of, her old bosses saying like, hey, we just let our assistant go. We're looking for a new like assistant for the, executives that created the show Scare Tactics on Sci-Fi with Tracy
Ooh.
Morgan. And like, the people who created the show. And, they were looking for a new assistant. So like, I got a call at like, I think it was a Friday. I got a call at like 11 a.m. on a Friday from just, a number I didn't recognize, an executive of this company, saying, hey, like, your friend Haley passed over your resume. It sounds really good. We're looking for an assistant. Could you interview today for it, at like 1 p.m. And, it was 11. I think that I had like zero clean clothes. So I had like, like I was just wearing definitely like laundry day outfit, jumped in my car, drove across town to Studio City for this interview at 11 o'clock. Did the interview, we all hit it off. One of the creators of the show actually was an alumni from my college in, the 80s or something like that. And then, on my way driving home at like 4 p.m., I got a call from them saying like, hey, we want to bring you in you're hired, you start Monday. Is that okay? So like, it went from having no idea that this job exists at like 10:59 a.m., getting a call, asking if I can interview, driving in at 1, across town, and then getting offered the job at 4, knowing that I'm starting 2 days later on Monday. And that's like a very normal thing in the entertainment industry. So once I got that gig, that was like a good job that I worked at for about 8 months. And while I was doing that, I like, started like, doing open mics in LA, taking like comedy classes at places like the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater and other comedy theaters. And, just like once I had like, like money coming in, it was easier to focus on like, okay, now comedy is why I moved here. So that's the thing I can kind of focus my attention on.
What was your first stand-up appearance like? When you first
Uh,
got on stage in front of people? It wasn't a lot of people.
oh, I mean, honestly, it was not good. I was, yeah. I think that stand up, like I appreciate it as an art form, but I think that stand up is just something I don't have like a ton of fun doing. Whereas like improv and sketch comedy and
Mm.
writing is something that I have a ton of fun doing. So I think that I like did a couple open mics and realized like, oh, I'm not good at this. But then like, did improv and sketch, and I was like, oh, but I like have the potential to be good at this thing. So then I kind of like focused all my energy at that stuff.
Like that whose line is it type joint, right?
Yeah, totally, that kind of stuff.
I dig that. That's historical stuff to me. All
Yeah,
right, so here you are. You stepping into the scene, you're navigating, and being Native American now, and now you're in it though, right?
yeah.
Are you seeing a lot of your of Native Americans in it as you're kind of now navigating early on? Did you see
So
that?
yeah, so like I think that for me, like I'm always somebody who's been like really passionate about my culture. Like while I was in college, I was like a mentor for the Native Student Center, and like growing up on a res, I would like go to powwows and stuff all the time. And like my mom is really passionate about the culture. So like honestly, when I moved to LA, before I even Googled like comedy theaters, I Googled just like Native American TV writers, and
Okay.
there was a really good panel put together by like the Writers Guild for what's called the Disney Fellowship, which is like this writers fellowship that they've been doing for the past couple decades. And there was one guy on the panel who was a member of the Blackfeet tribe, and like so I went to this panel just being like, wow, a native TV writer? I've never heard of such a thing. So I went to this panel, watched it, like walked up to this native writer afterwards and just said like, hey, my name's Joey Clift. Like I'm, enrolled Cowlitz. I'm native too. It's so cool to see a native writer here. I just moved to LA and, really excited to see natives, doing TV writing because that's what I want to do someday. And he was just like, wow, another native. And then like immediately put me on like a million email lists. And he was just like, email this person if you want like good fry bread recipes, email this person for whatever. And he just like hooked me up.
Beautiful,
And
beautiful.
so I've been like involved in Native Hollywood. Like Native Hollywood's kind of like the loose collection of Native folks working in the entertainment industry. Honestly, before I even started doing like comedy in LA. So I knew a lot of really funny comedians like in sort of Native Hollywood spaces that I would see at like Native Hollywood parties and shows and gatherings and stuff. but like I wasn't really seeing a lot of those native comedians getting opportunities in like sort of mainstream comedy spaces, like, you know, Second City, like, you know, the Groundlings, like, you know,
Mm.
UCB and stuff like that. So like I worked my way up at UCB. I got on what's called a house team, which is like a team put together by the theater. And UCB is like legit. It's like it's where like shows like Saturday Night Live kind of use it as a farm team to find their like writers and performers. So it's like it's super legit as like a stepping stone to
Cool.
later in your career. And I didn't like I realized not only was I not seeing any other native people getting opportunities at these theaters, but also like I was the first native to ever be on like a house team at these theaters to get like
What?
that big opportunity, which was like
Whoa.
crazy to me. So I actually after a couple of years you know, knowing all these super funny native comedians, put together like the first ever native comedy showcase that the theater had ever done, like with all native comedians. We had like 20 native comedians in the bill. I like produced it and hosted it. And
You
so like,
found 20 Native American comedians. Look at that.
oh yeah,
You had trouble finding one, and all of a sudden, right? The
oh
gates
yeah, yeah.
open.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 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 totally. Yeah, for sure. And it's like, so you know, so it's like I think that now things are getting better because like shows like Reservation Dogs, Rutherford Falls, and like Spirit Rangers, which is a Netflix show, I was a writer on. Like I feel like we're all kind of finding each other in a really cool way. So it's like I feel like when I started, native comedians weren't really getting a ton of opportunities. But now it's like you're seeing a lot of super funny native comedians, you know, in LA doing spots at like, you know, big theaters like, you know, like Largo and like Dynasty Typewriter and like Just for Laughs, which is a really good comedy festival up in Canada. So it's like, you know, it's growing. It's like we're not there's maybe 200 of us who are actively doing stuff, but like, you know,
But
a
it's a
couple years
wonderful
ago, yeah.
it's a
Yeah, yeah.
wonderful thing because again to see it evolve
Yeah,
in
totally,
terms
totally,
of
totally.
native representation. You know, since you know, and then you know you seen it evolve since you started too. So it's a beautiful thing. It's like you came in at the right time, Joy.
Yeah, yeah, it is really it's like cool to see. You're right. It's like seeing it evolve from like, you know, when I first started and I was like the first native comedian to get some of these mainstream comedy opportunities, like, and now there's like I have a ton of friends who are funny native comedians who are like doing big stuff all over the place. And it's just I don't know, it's just even, you know, like 13 years doesn't it feels like a long time, but also doesn't feel like a long time, you know? And it's like
Gotcha.
so cool to see, even over the past 5 years, how much it's like exploded.
Gotcha. Okay, and it's exploding. Good thing, right? The growth. But do you feel that they're taking the necessary steps to ensure that the representation is good and proper? You know what I mean?
I mean, I
Respectful.
think for you, do you mean like they like native comedians or like just like shows and studios
The
and stuff?
shows. You know what? Okay,
Yeah,
basically, let me rephrase that. What
yeah,
steps
yeah,
do you
yeah.
think we are necessary to ensure authentic Native representation? You know, in
So,
TV shows and movies.
okay, so that's a good question. So, like, I think that like I definitely think it's gotten a lot better. I mean, you know, 10 years ago, like the Lone Ranger came out with Johnny Depp as Tonto, you know, so it's
Oh,
like,
so,
or
yeah.
like, yeah, you know, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like, it's not that long ago that stuff was maybe not great. And there, you know, but I think that like, I think that like non-natives, like, you know, executives, producers and stuff like that are becoming a little bit more aware of how to tell native stories the right way. So we've got shows like, you know, like I mentioned, Reservation Dogs and Spirit Rangers, which is a show that I wrote on, where like it's like created by a native person with like an all native writers room, you know, native folks in the cast and crew, like and I think that like, and those are shows that are like really authentic and like feel like they're coming from a really authentic place. And these are like the first shows created by native people to ever be on American television. Like
Insane.
yeah, like Rutherford Falls
Insane.
and Reservation Dogs are the first two TV shows with like a native creator and like largely native writers rooms. And those came out in like 2021, you know?
That's what I'm
Like
saying. The
yeah,
history of Hollywood. I mean, come on, over 100 years. You telling me
yeah.
at the 100th year? Okay, here's your piece. Like, okay,
Oh
cool.
yeah, I mean it's wild. It's like I think about that like Spirit Rangers, the show that I wrote on. That's the first kids animated TV show in the history of U.S. animation with like a native creator, the genius Shumatch TV writer Chris Valencia, you know, an all native writers room, and that came out in October of last year. So that came out 9 months ago, you know.
Crazy.
So it's like, and that's so like that's something I think about is like, you know, TV's been around since like 1930. So it took 100 years for like native folks to get these opportunities, you know. And so you know, so I think that we're getting better, and I think that like we're also seeing stuff even where it's not like written or directed by a native person. Like, did you see Prey, the Predator movie?
Oh yeah, love
Oh,
the
it's
hell
so
out that
good.
movie. Love
Yeah,
me and my
dude. Yeah.
dad. My dad, not much of a big fan of modern movies. He said when it finished, the next day he goes, "Hey, can you put that movie again for me? I really gotta see it
Yeah.
again."
Oh yeah, it's so good. Yeah, and like and Prey is like dope because like Prey's about it's basically Predator versus the Comanche Nation essentially in the 1700s, I think. And what's so dope about that movie is like it was written and directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who's not native, but very early on he was like, "Oh, I want to do the Comanche stuff right." So he brought on Jane Myers, which is like a really amazing producer who's a member of the Comanche Nation, like
Oh,
super
amazing.
early on in like a high level decision making position. And so like everything in the movie really trickled down from that. So like from her being a producer on the film, like they had like a really awesome native cast, folks like Amber Midthunder, who starred in it, and like Dakota Beavers, who was her brother in the movie. Like they had natives all over the crew. I think that they even had like a deal where it was like they offered internships to natives that wanted to work in the entertainment industry to intern in different parts of the production.
Oh,
um,
cool.
and like they went as far as like, and this is like, I've talked to a couple members of the Comanche tribe who have told me that like they went so far as like screening cuts of the film before it came out to like elders in the Comanche tribe to make sure that like everything felt right,
Oh, that's no wonder for me. I
Yeah,
love again. I loved it. I'm partly native from my Taino,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Puerto
dope.
Rican.
Hell yeah.
So we're tribesmen. I
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, yeah,
um. So I appreciate that. I'm digging it. Well, no wonder it
yeah,
felt so right.
yeah,
Because I enjoyed the crap out that movie. Oh, for real. It's definitely on my top list of my favorite
yeah.
Predator
I,
movies.
I got really lucky. I got invited to the Prey premiere like last year, and like and like
No.
and like it's a Hulu movie, so it's not it didn't get like a big theatrical release, but I was able to see it in a room with like 300 other native folks, and like, oh man, I want to like bottle the emotion of being able to watch that. And, it's just it was just such a good experience. And it's so
That's
like,
awesome.
so you get stuff like Reservation Dogs, where it's like created by a native person and top down, a lot of native folks involved. And then I think Prey is a good example of like, oh, they definitely like, though it wasn't written or directed by a native person, they brought in a native person early on in like a high level decision making position and let that kind of influence the production. So I think that like, like talking to a lot of different people, in Hollywood, and also just like working on my own stuff, I think that like it's really cool to see, like non-natives being aware of like what they need to do to tell native stories effectively and the right way. So I think that and that's not to say that it's perfect. There's definitely still like things here and there that like
Of
could be done better, but it's like I feel like we're heading in a positive direction, and it's really
Yeah,
cool to see.
I agree 100, especially if you're gonna hire someone. I mean, good on that, the director to be such a forward thinker. All
Yeah,
right, so
totally, totally.
and you're talking about production, so could you tell us more about your little animated short film? Get ready, folks. Telling people you're Native American when you're not Native is a lot like telling a bear you're a bear when you're not a bear, and its impact on your career.
Okay, yeah, a story about that. When I came up with the name for that short, I didn't think I was gonna have to say it very often. Yeah, so honestly, so I made that short in 2018. I wrote, directed, and produced it, and I made it to screen in that all native comedy showcase I was telling you about.
Okay.
Like I made it because like I wrote it, or I produced and hosted that show, but I really, because I'm primarily a writer, I wanted a piece of my writing to showcase in it. So I put together this short basically just to screen in that show, and it just like got such a good reaction from the audience that I kind of thought to myself like, oh, I should like submit this for film festivals. So I submitted it to the festival circuit, my first time ever like submitting something into the festival circuit, and it
Oh
like
wow.
blew up. It got into like dozens of festivals. It won awards. It screened everywhere from like Just for Laughs to the
What?
Smithsonian Museum, which is
All for
crazy.
something you created just to, all right, let me put myself out here and this
Yeah,
is what's
totally,
gonna.
totally, totally.
Well, you
Yeah.
live a life of surprises. You wake up
Oh
one
yeah.
morning, you land a job. One day, let me just put a video, and now you're getting awards. Look at this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that, like you kind of just, I'm sure you get it. You just kind of just gotta like go with the flow.
Hey,
Um, but yeah, so I made it, and like then while I was working on it, or while I was going through festivals, a lot of people would ask me like, okay, so like, what's the what's next? Is there like a TV show with this short? Is there anything else that you could do with it? So I came up with the idea to do it as a web series with a bunch of different shorts, all about like different like microaggressions that native folks run into. So I won this thing called the Yes and Laughter Lab with, that pitch of the series in 2019. That's like a thing put together by Comedy Central.
Okay.
That introduced me to a bunch of folks at Comedy Central. So then in 2020, 2021, they bought like a second short, which was the sports mascot short, which is also on the Gone Native site. And then that did really well. And all of these shorts, like, have done millions of views online, which has been really cool to see. And
Awesome.
and then with those two shorts being successful, we ended up getting grant funding from this really good grant funder called Pop Culture Collab to, like, finish the series, make an additional 3 shorts. And though when I made that bear short, I didn't really intend for it to be a series. It's kind of become like the first episode of this Gone Native series that I'm, really proud of and excited to talk about.
Actually, I mean, from this one right here, Gone Native, created by Joey Clift. Awesome. So, amazing story, though. I mean, you start again with just an idea, something small, showcase yourself, and the journey to this now. So, talk about this bad boy. I mean, we could see all the episodes on this awesome website, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You can see all 5 episodes on the website, and something I'm really, really excited about with the website is that if you go, each episode has its own page, and if you go to that page, there's like more resources about about these topics, because these are big topics that these are about. Like, this is about, like, microaggressions Native folks run into. But if you scroll down a little bit, you can see, like, if you want more information
Okay.
about, pretendians or anything like that,
Pretendians.
there's link, like people who like to say they're Native when they're not Native. There's like links to like articles, so you can do a deeper dive than this, 2-minute animated short where a guy gets mauled by a bear over and over again can maybe do.
Oh, that
Um,
cracked me up, man. As I was watching, I'm like, wow, this MFR just doesn't learn his lesson, apparently. I was dying the whole time. Like, all right, this is great. I mean, folks, you definitely got, this is the website. I mean, it's right there, folks. All the episodes and a whole lot more. Believe you me that if you're feeling blue, there's a website that'll make you laugh and
Thank
learn a
you.
little something for sure about our amazing, Native people. Hey, well, we gotta call them natives. I mean, they're Americans, right?
What's so
The
Yeah,
original owners.
yeah. I mean, it's like that's a big conversation about, like, it's like some people prefer Native just because it's like Native American. Some people are bummed out about it, because like we were here before America,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So I think native or indigenous is usually what, like, a lot of folks prefer to go by.
The indigenous, I think it sounds a better
Yeah,
word
yeah,
for
yeah.
me, for sure. Oh man, but I'm digging it, man. So, all right, we gotta ask here then. So, how do you balance addressing serious issues while still making people laugh as you do this? I mean, what's that thought process and writing process like?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. So I think that for me, like, ultimately, like, I came up just like as a comedy writer. My goal wasn't necessarily to tell, like, to go into big messages with my jokes. I just wanted to write, like, the funniest joke about Batman or whatever, like,
I got you.
but at a certain point, I started to realize, like, oh, there's like issues that I'm really passionate about, like, especially, growing up on a res and being like really proud of my culture, like a lot of, Native issues and like microaggressions that Native folks run into. And, so you kind of think about, like, ultimately what you're doing as a comedian is you're shining a light on something and saying, this is weird, right? And that's kind of what, like, every joke is. And like when people laugh, that's an acknowledgement of, like, I agree that is weird. So, like, it starts to think about, like, instead of just writing about, like, oh, here's this weird thing about, like, the Spider-Man movies or whatever. It's like, oh, what's like a real thing that I can use that, like, comedic satirical point
Hmm.
on. So, like, for me, it's like once I started kind of pointing that laser beam toward Native stuff, ultimately I started from a place of like writing just stuff that I thought that like made me laugh. And then, and then from there you kind of go into, like, okay, what would be like, what's like annoying to me, or what bugs me about like microaggressions that non-natives say or whatever. And then, like, why does that annoy me? And then, like, what is the comedic point that I could make about why that annoys me? And then, I think that from there it's like, ultimately, like, if you're using comedy for, like, social messaging, the comedy has to be funny. You can't just seem like
Oh,
you're like
yes.
lecturing people, you know?
Right.
Because like people will immediately turn off if they feel like they're being like talked down to or whatever, being finger wagged or whatever. So, you know, it's like it's kind of like it's like weighing the like, okay, here's the point I want to make. How can I do that in a way that's funny, that while also maintaining what the point is? And you kind of look at it as like it's like the social message that you're trying to push is like the medicine, and then the jokes are like the candy that you wrap around the medicine to make it like easier to get down, you know. And I also like I'm friends with a lot of like really super funny like native and non-native comedians. Like I'll always like with this series, it's like when I wrote the first drafts of the scripts, I got a bunch of funny writers together, and we all just kind of like read the scripts, and people punched up jokes and stuff like that. So it's like I think it's important to be collaborative and to just like work with a
Yes.
lot of people, and like, you know, you could say like, okay, I think this is funny, but if I like send it to a bunch of my comedian friends, will they think it's funny for the same reasons, or will they say like, oh yeah, make this phrase shorter, or hey, say this instead of this, or like whatever, you know. So it's like workshop. It's like coming up with an idea that you think is funny, that maybe has a little bit of a point to it, and then also just like workshopping it with folks until you
Okay.
get to like, you know, what you think is like the best version of the thing, and then you know, you even like, you know, work with the actors and the animators to like for animation to talk about like, okay, so like, you know, we've got the script which a bunch of writers think is good. Does the actor have like notes or thoughts, or do they think that something's hard to say, or do they not get something? And then, you know, it's pretty much like a process of like you're just like polishing it until it's online pretty much, you know, or until it's
Gotcha.
like out in the world.
Gotcha. And so, how many more episodes can we expect of Gone Native? What's the future of Gone Native looking like?
So, you know, right now we just have the 5 episodes, which I'm, you know, really excited about and really proud of. You know, I definitely have. We don't have any more episodes that are currently in the production pipeline, but like I definitely have like a lot of ideas for you know, episodes that I'm really excited about. Like
Excellent.
I'd love to do an episode called a complete list of things you can ask Native people about that is not Thanksgiving, because I feel like Native folks are always asked about like, oh, is Thanksgiving weird for you? And it's like, you could ask me about other shit. I love pro wrestling. Ask me about pro wrestling. Like, you know, so, you know, I've got ideas for
Yo,
other
bro,
shorts.
you know what? It's not only Native Americans that go through that. You know, indigenous folk, Cubans go through that because if
Yeah.
anyone that meets a Cuban immediately is like, "Yo, so how did you deal with Fidel?" Like, what are you talking about? Yo, everybody's
Yeah.
like, "What the hell are you talking about? I may be Cuban, but I've been off that island."
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure.
You know,
Yeah. No,
it's
yeah.
funny shit, right?
Yeah. It's like one of those things where it's like, I feel like that happens for any sort of like, you know, any sort of like marginalized group, is it's like you have that like 3 things that people aren't in your group will ask you about, and at a certain point, yeah, you're just like, yeah, what do you think about like Fidel? And it's like, I don't know, like,
What do you
you
want me to
know,
tell you, right?
yeah, it's like also like who are you, why are you like, I don't know, you're my delivery driver for DoorDash, why are you
Yeah,
asking me
right.
this question? Like,
Oh, yo, those are the ones that ask the most intimate questions like that, personal. What are
yeah,
you
yeah,
talking about? Are you trying to get me shot in this car? Like, what's going on
yeah,
here?
no, yeah, it's like, oh, you don't know how much of a can of worms that question is, and it's like I got shit to do. Like,
Right? Do you really
um
want me to give you that goddamn list right now? Why you shouldn't be asking me
yeah, no,
that?
100%, 100%. So I think that for me, it's just like that's like a fun area. It's like fun to make jokes about that stuff because I feel like it's so
Yeah.
like prevalent, you know.
Oh yeah. Listen, man. If we can't laugh at this stuff, I mean, this
Oh,
how we
100%.
take its power away by
Yeah,
laughing at
100%,
it.
100%,
I'm
100%.
digging it. I'm digging it. So I know there's a lot of things going on out there in the wood right now. uh, does that affect you in any way towards any future appearances and work with what's going on now?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, you know, I think that, you know, for us, the big elephant in the room in Hollywood is that, you know, the Writers Guild of America and the just very recently the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA are both on strike. And you know, like though I'm not a member of SAG or the WGA, I'm a member of the Animation Guild, which covers most kind of animated productions. So you know, like it doesn't necessarily affect my animation work because our deal with the studios doesn't expire for another year. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't go on strike, you know, for another
Gotcha.
year. But like, you know, like solidarity, like I try to march on the picket line in solidarity, you know, like at least once a week. I've organized a couple of like Animation Guild solidarity pickets where we've gotten like 300 animation workers to come
Wow.
out and support the WGA. Like I have a lot of friends in the WGA. I have a lot of friends in SAG. So like for me, it's like we're all fighting for the same thing, which is what I think like everybody in this country is fighting for, which is just like people getting paid what they're worth,
Oh,
especially when,
absolutely.
when you see that like the CEOs of these companies are making hundreds of $1 millions a year. Meanwhile, like I have so many writer friends who are like having to like, move home because they can't afford to live in LA
I know,
anymore on
right?
the
And
salary.
sleep on the couch for 3 years or more because
Yeah,
they,
yeah, 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 legit.
and yet
Yeah.
they're working on a hit show, so it's like doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, it's stuff like the like I read about this recently. Like, do you remember? Did you watch the show Orange Is the New Black on Netflix?
I'm familiar with the show. I caught things
Yeah.
here and there.
So, like, one of the actors from Orange Is the New Black recently kind of revealed how much they were paid to work on that show, and they were paid so little that they lost money on working on that show.
What?
And that was one of the top shows on Netflix, and they lost money because they were hired as what's called a local hire. So Netflix did not pay for their travel to where the show shot,
Oh,
so they had to
damn.
pay for their own flights and hotels, and they didn't make enough to even cover their flights and hotels for being one of the stars of one of Netflix's biggest shows. And it's like,
Shame on
and
Netflix.
Netflix is
My
like
God.
$1 billion company. You can afford,
Yo. Yeah,
and that,
at least coach. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, it's legit. It's like,
Put me in
yeah,
the luggage area, something. God, just pay for it.
yeah. So I think that's like a lot of what this fight is about, right? Is it's like, it's like I know so many writers who are, good writers and good people and really talented people who are like struggling to pay their rent because of the way that writers' rooms have kind of, and especially with streaming, have become like you don't get residuals, or you don't get the same amount of residuals on streaming as you do on network shows. Writers' rooms are a lot smaller and the episode orders are way shorter. Like a Netflix series that's 6 episodes, or a Disney Plus series
Yeah.
that's 8 episodes. It's like,
All right. I gotta ask you that
yeah,
since
yeah,
you
yeah.
are in the industry. What's happened? I remember the days of the 24 episode season has now whittled down to 6, like you said. What's happened?
Yeah, well, so I think that a lot of it's streaming because like streaming, especially like Netflix and a lot of the different places, they operate on like the binge model, which is they want you to sit down and watch all the episodes at once. And it's like it would be, and like they factored in, they have like algorithms and stuff like
Yeah.
that to like figure out, okay, what's the minimum amount of episodes that you can create for a series to get a new subscriber. So like by the model being subscriber based, they're more focusing on that. Whereas the network model, on like, CBS,
Hmm.
NBC, whatever, that's like a commercial model. So they get their money from commercials.
Okay.
So like if you have a commercial model and you have a hit show, you want that show to go for like 23, 24 weeks, because that's 24 weeks of like
Revenue.
a lot of money that you're getting for those commercials. And
Okay.
with streaming focusing on the subscriber model, like it's more money for them, but it's just the amount that they're getting is like calculated differently in that, like,
Gotcha. It's math.
you
It's algebra and all that shit mixed into one. Gotcha.
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, no, 100%. It's like a math thing, but it's the sort of thing where like it's like these streaming services are some of the most profitable companies in the world. It's not that they're not making money. It's just that like it's like residuals and all of that income is calculated often by commercial revenue. Commercials, the
Yes.
the time, the money spent on those commercial slots for like network shows. And because streaming, up until recently didn't really have commercials, it's just a different revenue stream. And the math, the legal contract math has not been done on how to give people a piece of the
Ah,
pie of that revenue stream. And like,
gotcha.
and the money's being made. It's like somebody, it's like,
Well, that's the funny part.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
figured out how to make the money, but they totally skipped on. Oh, let's share equally, or however we need to share, so that
Yeah.
way everybody wins.
When
Whoa.
it's also wild because like a lot of these streaming services are shifting to models where they do have commercials. Like, Netflix I think has a commercial service, like Peacock, and like a lot of these streaming services have commercials now.
Yep, for
But
eight,
like,
$10 a month.
yeah, but like the writers ain't getting a cut of those commercials, like, because it's just not written into
Oh,
the contract. And it's like if it
not
was
fair.
on like network TV, like cable, they would get those residuals. But because it's just the deal has not been worked out in streaming, even when there's commercials for like a Peacock show, the writers and actors and directors and editors aren't getting a cut of that. So it's like, that's kind of like where a lot of the, SAG and WGA and where a lot of the stuff applies. It's like, artificial intelligence for sure, making sure there's protections for that. But in addition to that, it's also just like making sure that like there's like stuff written down as to people getting, a cut of the pie,
How do you feel about AI, as a writer, and it being used to, to create shows and
Um,
whatnot?
so I guess that I would say that my worry with AI is that AI is like, it's like a plagiarism machine, right? It's
Uh,
like it can't create new things. It can only take old things and then reconfigure them into, into a thing based on the things that it ingested. And like for me, there is definitely some worry of like, like I said, with this like streaming revenue, it's like these studios and producers, like, they'll find whatever opportunity they can to like get a bigger piece of the pie. And so the worry is that like if they can figure out how to like, not have to pay a writer's room on a show, even if it makes a less good show, they'll like try to do that.
oh yes, they would.
You
I
know,
mean, listen, they've gone down to the bottom of the barrel and have even threatened starvation of writers. You know what I mean?
yeah, no,
Which
yeah.
which is, for me, disgusting behavior. So this is why having a writer here, just, I mean, how do you feel about a bigwig, threatening in, such a way, such
It's
valuable people on the team?
Yeah, well, there was that story. I think we're talking about the same thing, which is that
Yeah,
story from like an anonymous AMPTP,
yeah.
which is the kind of the essentially the collection of studios. Like they said something to the effect of their goal is to not negotiate with the writers until October, when the writers start losing their apartments and homes, and then they're desperate to take a deal, and that's when they negotiate them. And it's like, oh, that's like, you understand how much of a monster you sound like saying that, right?
Right.
It's like
That's some
your
grimy
goal is to
shit.
make writers homeless and then you'll negotiate, and it's like, it's like, so there's that, but then like there's also that, like I think that the SAG released this a few days ago, like um like most of the people in SAG after the union for actors are what are called background actors, which are,
Mm.
extras, people in the background. And it's like it's an honest living. It's like, a 12-hour day. It's definitely hard work. I have a lot of friends that do that kind of job. And one of the proposals from the AMPTP when they were trying to negotiate with SAG before the strike was, instead of having background actors, they would like to pay an actor a day rate of like $120, scan their entire body and their face, and then for $120 be able to use their likeness forever in
Hell
any way
no.
they want, so they can digitally put them in the background on any show that they want to put them in.
Hell no. That's a worse
Yeah.
deal than the poor old school comic book writers got. That, where
Yeah.
Marvel was
No.
making money, but not the creators.
No, legit. Well, that's like okay,
Whoa.
something that for some people is like a career where you don't make insane money, but it's like you might make like 30,000
It's a
bucks a
living.
year or
A
something. It's a
living.
living, it's like, and it's like, oh, you want to wipe out like the majority of SAG who are background workers by giving them $120 once to be able to use their likeness forever, like,
Dude,
and in
yeah.
any form, and to be able to like manipulate and change things how
Oh
you
my
want.
God. That means Joey
Yeah.
Clift could be on an X-rated movie in the future. You
Yeah.
never
No,
know if he
legit,
was a
legit. Yeah.
background.
Yeah,
Like,
legit.
is that
Yeah.
really Joey?
No, legit. It's like there's
It's
there's no
scary.
well, yeah,
It's
and the thing is
scary.
like there's no at the moment there's no protections in place in union contracts that says that they can't, scan an actor and then put them in an X-rated movie.
Oh.
So that's what SAG's fighting for on the acting end of it, is just like your likeness, and and the WGA is fighting for that in like, like saying that like the studios can't just take all the scripts that I've written and then put that into an AI and then use that to generate new scripts that like I get no money for, when it's clearly based on my work, So it's like, it's just like, I think that the reason for all this is like we're all fighting for like just the ability to make money, to make a living doing this in the future. And it's like, we're not rich. I mean, I don't know. It's
No.
like I have this screen up because like my bed's behind me. It's like like
Listen. it's like you said, get paid what you're worth. Get paid for
Yeah.
that time, for that creation, and then if that creation takes off, you should get fair compensation for that as well. Going
Oh
forward,
yeah,
why
for sure.
not?
Yeah, for
Why
sure.
not?
I mean, like it's like what there's a really popular kids animated series that in that's been on for like 25 years in the States that has made $20 billion in merchandise sales. And like
Oof.
it's $20 billion in merchandise sales. And like the people who created those characters, the creator of the show, they're not getting a cent of that, but it's going to somebody. So it's like, it's just like that kind of stuff where it's like these are some of the richest organizations in the world. Like David Zaslav made like, you know, $250 million last year. They can afford to like they have the money to be able to like pay people fairly, but they're trying to like
Well,
cut
from
corners so the rich can
from
get
what I
richer.
understand, I think that a couple of years back, several years back, a owner or the CEO would be making 20 times over what
Yeah,
the
the
bottom
lowest.
person,
Yeah, yeah.
the low. But now they're talking about it's like a 200 times that,
Yeah,
400
it's like
times
300
that.
times that. Yeah, no, it's
Jesus
legit. It's
Christ, that's
legit.
not fair. My gosh. From
Yeah, it's
20 to 300, that pay ratio is
yeah.
insane, son.
Yeah, when it's wild because it's like David Zaslav made $250 million last year. Like as he's the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery.
If you had that cancel bad girl, and then Flash had
Yeah,
the
yeah,
worst movie, worse
yeah.
than Green Lantern, in its theatrical run.
Yeah,
Insane.
well, when it's like, so he made $250 million last year. The total of what all like, like 12,000 members of the WGA are asking for is like $400 million, which is that's like not for one person, that's for everybody. So that
Of
totals
course.
out to about like, like 10, $20,000 per writer or something like that. So like literally, if David Zaslav took a $200 million pay cut, he would be able to pay for like half of literally
Whoa.
everything that every writer is asking for, and he would still make $50 million a year. Like so,
Exactly. And
it's like
you living lovely still at 50.
yeah, yeah. So it's like that kind of thing.
Wow. Don't worry, Joe. We'll get you there making 50 and 100 in the future too, the right way where everybody's going to be winning. All right. This is what we need to
Fingers
do.
crossed. Yeah,
Yeah, fingers crossed for real. And shout out to everybody in the picking line. You have our
yeah,
support and love.
for
Um,
sure.
so what's up, man? Being that obviously you can't, there's a lot of things that a lot of people can't do nowadays, and so you was mentioning that you're doing a lot of speaking engagements, before you came on, or doing some speaking. So what's up, man? Where can we see you next? Either speaking or dropping some jokes. What's going on?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thanks. So I would say that a lot of my speaking engagements are like with it's like different organizations flying me out to talk for like conferences and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily like it's not like at like clubs or anything.
Okay.
So I'd say the best way to follow me would be follow me on Twitter at Joeytainment. Follow me on Instagram at Joey Clift. I think my threads is Joey Clift. I've also got a TikTok at Joeytainment. I'm on all the socials. If you search Joey Clift, I'll probably come up. And and check out my series Gone Native TV. GoneNative.tv is where you can see all the episodes. And I've got a couple things coming up that I can't quite announce yet, but if you keep following me on the socials, you'll definitely see more cool things that I'm working on and other things that I've got going on.
I can't wait, Joey, bro. Because thank you for creating this cool animated series. Definitely put a smile on my face, had me laughing again because there's a lot of the jokes I could definitely get. Being a person of color, or like what was it like the congressman said the other day? Got maybe much in trouble using the other word. he, he, he referred to his own constituents, colored people, in the thing. I was like, and they were like,
uh,
"Excuse me." Yeah, I was like, "Wow, yeah." And we're not grown yet, people. Anyway, people for real though, if you want to laugh, check out this show right there. Go to the website right now, gonenative.tv. The link's below. Click away, show the love. I'm telling you, this is great. Joey has that real good, genuine sense of humor that you will laugh. You know what I mean? It's good humor, good feeling humor. You know what I mean? And it has a little message too, but it doesn't slap you in the face like they try to do on Twitter. You feel me? It just really takes it easy, all right? So as he said, please follow him as well at Joeytainment on Twitter. And it's Joey Clift. There's several eyes in that one, but it's below. All right. Just click away and sort of love. Let him know that CC at Mega sent you. All right. Joey, I really appreciate your time as a fan of comedy and everything. Just want to say thank you as a fan to a creator. Thank you for taking your time to put product out there. Share of yourself, share your vision, share your dreams, share your humor. We definitely appreciate it, and I cannot wait to see what else comes out of the Clift verse. All right. So with that, mi gente, you
Awesome.
know what
Thanks,
it
Al. Yeah,
is.
thanks for having me.
Nah, brother, you rock, bro. I'm gonna follow everything Joey Clift for real, man. I can't wait. All right, mi gente. Besides following him, check us out too at Comic Crusaders. We got everything for you. Comics, movies, music. We do it all, even wrestling. All right. Check us out at Comic Crusaders all over the socials. Hasta la próxima, mi gente. ¡Huepa! Thank you for listening to the Comic Crusaders podcast. If you like the content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, please visit comiccrusaders.shop and our extended podcast family over at undercovercapes.com. And also, make sure to download the Comic Crusaders app on the Google Play Store today.